you make the statement, it feels, I feel, that there is a discontinuity in consciousness.
Yes.
Question, what feels that? There must be something during the discontinuity that feels the discontinuity.
Well, I would say that I feel that when there is evidence I actually woke up, you know, I might check my alarm clock.
Then it's an inference, it's not an experience.
It is an inference, yes.
Well, on what basis do you infer a discontinuity of consciousness?
I mean, every time that I wake up, it just, you know, the state of being fully awake, from getting up to being, you know, dizzy and everything, to coming back, and you kind of realize that you were actually unconscious, right?
How do you realize that you were unconscious?
That is, of course, is inferential. You know, I might be looking that the sun is out now. The last time I was awake was night.
Well. Okay. Now we have moved a little further. Mm-hmm. Now, you made the statement, I feel, meaning I have the experience of a discontinuity in consciousness. Now, we have a little bit changed the picture. It is not an experience, it's an inference. So you are saying, I am inferring a discontinuity in consciousness based upon the residues that I have in memory, right?
Right.
Right. Now, how does inference work? The best type of inference is the one for which Aesopus was killed. You know, there was this priest in Greece, and they had this, I don't know, this statue, and there was some vapors or fumes or smoke coming out of the statues, and it was supposed to be of miraculous origin or of divine origin. In fact, there was a guy making a fire, you know, well hidden somewhere inside. And Aesopus said, there is no smoke without fire. That was the inference. If there is smoke, there is fire. The priest had him killed. You know, they had fundamentalists already at that time. So, he was killed for inferring the truth, right? So, how does inference work? There is no, because I have witnessed again and again two things. The thing which is inferred, the fire, and the thing which is produced, the smoke. Again and again, I have witnessed these two concomitant events. And then there is this induction principle that we use in science that says, okay, next time I see smoke, since there seems to be this one-on-one relationship between the smoke and the fire, then I will say there is fire. Now, you said in the case of consciousness, it's the same thing. It's an inference. Now, to apply this model of inference, I must have simultaneously witnessed the two things. The inferred thing, which is the absence of consciousness, and the phenomenon from which I infer it, which is whatever residues there are upon waking up. The problem with this inference is that the fire, the inferred item, you have never witnessed it. You see? You have never witnessed the absence of consciousness because it's simply impossible to witness. Therefore, the inference model doesn't work in that case because there is no prior observation multiple observations of an absence of consciousness. That's what is missing.
Yes.
So first, the absence of consciousness was experienced. Then it turned out not to be the case. Second, it was inferred. Now it turns out that it was not the case.
Right.
So what's left?
Yeah, I guess I have never experienced absence of consciousness.
And you cannot infer it either.
I cannot. So I guess the other question perhaps was similar when you were describing the example of the computer, but somehow from other objects the body seems perhaps it's easier to identify with the body because you have pain or suffering related to the body. If somebody was to smash the computer, I can suffer, but perhaps there is no physical pain or immediate pain. But with damage to the body, there is this association that, I will die, or the experience of consciousness, of being conscious, will end.
Well, let's put it this way. There is something I am witnessing in my body that I don't like, right? And these things that I don't like, I would like it to be different. So I am going to do something in order to make it different. For instance, I'm going to go to the dentist, or I'm going to take some Advil, or I'm going to try next time not to eat as much before going to bed, right? Whatever. I'm going to try, or not to drink as much alcohol, or whatever. I'm going to try to do something in order to eliminate the problem. But it's the same with things in the world. If I see something that I don't like in the world, I try also to change it.
Yes, but with the body, at least from the technological standpoint, you like I can't, for example, can't chop off my head and then try to continue, right? With certain things I cannot change.
Oh, you could chop off your head.
Then, yeah, I guess
Because you could go to certain part of the world, it would be easy.
Oh yeah, they would do it.
They do it for free.
Right. But it seems like with certain modifications, like, committing suicide or certain things, there is this, perhaps an assumption that my consciousness will end. Somebody committing suicide will be, my suffering ends with this act.
Yeah, but all of those are conjectures, right?
Right.
You are entitled to your hypothesis or to your conjectures, but that doesn't make it hard science.
Yeah, that's true. There is no way to verify that consciousness would not continue after my body was dead.
I think what is important for you is to make a distinction between consciousness of something, consciousness of a feeling, consciousness, and pure consciousness. You see, in psychology, because psychology is a science, and science is exclusively phenomenal. There is no room in science, be it in physics or in psychology or in chemistry, whatever. There is no room for anything which is non-phenomenal, so including psychology. So from the beginning, psychology has excluded the possibility of pure consciousness, because a pure consciousness is non-phenomenal. So then, having excluded it from its field, from the beginning, it reaches the conclusion that there is no such a thing as non-phenomenal consciousness. But this conclusion was implied in the foundational axioms of the science. So they have no probative value, if you will. You see? So the question is, now that we have eliminated this aspect, this objection, we say, yeah, in psychology, nobody believes in non-phenomenal consciousness. Let me try to prove to you experientially the existence of non-phenomenal consciousness. And we can have an intuition of it, or a glimpse of it, by analyzing what happens when we shift from one thought to another. Let me give you an example. The example I use, let's assume I am thinking of my next vacation, right? That's thought number one, making plans, etc. And then the thought comes to me, oh gee, I was planning for my next vacation. That's thought number two, How do we account for thought number two? We say, thought number two, if we formulate it, is, I all of a sudden became conscious that I was planning for my next vacation. So there is a gap between these two thoughts. Thought number two is not the normal continuation of thought number one. You see what I mean? Thought number one may have elapsed for 30 minutes, thinking about where am I going to go, envisioning the various destinations, the cost, the hotels, the transportation, the duration, the problems, the passport, whatever, That was one single thought, moving from one aspect to the other, right? That was one thing. But then, all of a sudden, I realized I was planning for... It is a thought about the previous thought, and in order for thought number two to think about thought number one has ceased to exist. Right? So thought number one ceases to exist, and then thought number two arises. In between, this event was not nothing. That's the point I am making. That which happens between thought number one and thought number two is not a nothingness. Why? Because we formulate it, it's something very important that happens between these two thoughts. We formulate it by saying, I became aware of that. You see? It's like, all of a sudden, Einstein, E square equals mc squares. No, but E squares equals m squared c to the fourth plus p squared. Okay? So all of a sudden, right? Before, it wasn't there. Thereafter, he formulates it. Whatever was in between, the inside, was not nothing. You see, it was very important. It revolutionizes science. It happens in this transition or interval between two thoughts. And we formulate that by saying, oh, I became aware all of a sudden of this extraordinary possibility that mass and energy are the same thing. Well, whatever, right? So, this interval is not nothing. So, we cannot say, because that would be another way to pretend that the phenomenal aspect of things is continuous, by saying, oh, well, these two thoughts are different, thought number one and thought number two, but really in the interval between them, there is nothing, so we can glue them together. We can glue them together because there is nothing in between. Well, it's not possible to glue them together because there is something very important in between. Because there is a meat in between. You know, where is the beef? Remember that one? There is a beef in between. These thought number 1 and thought number 2, they are the bread of the sandwich. But in the interval in between, that's where the proteins are, you know. I'm a vegetarian. I'm not, I apologize for the metaphor. I should find something else. But anyway. So it cannot be said now that there is no discontinuity. Because in the discontinuity, something happens. And this discontinuity is a singularity. You see? And this singularity in the wisdom of the ages, in the wisdom, there is a wisdom in the language, in semantics. We formulate it by saying, I became conscious. I became aware. In fact, what happens? In this interval, I became awareness. I became consciousness. Why? Because that which was kind of hiding it, the thought, all of a sudden vanished. So that which remains was this source of intelligence, of understanding, of becoming aware. And if you think of the processes through which we understand, you know, we know that. We know these gaps, these intervals. So, why did I make this long speech answering your question? Because it's very important to be open to the possibility of a non-phenomenal experience. Non-phenomenal meaning that doesn't elapse in time, which is singular, which is timeless, but nonetheless very real, which we experience, and in which there is consciousness, because we cannot say that in this interval there was no consciousness, right? Why cannot we say that? Because we say, I became conscious. Precisely this interval, far from being an interval in which there was no consciousness, is just the opposite. It's an interval in which there was only consciousness. So it was not an unconscious moment. It was, if we can say that, a maximum consciousness moment. Now, when we are open to the possibility of consciousness without an object, that opens the door to a different kind of experiencing, to a different field of investigation, if you will, which in our culture is completely forgotten. There are no classes on consciousness in our schools. No? And so it opens the possibility, and it redirects our interest, our attention towards this new mode of knowledge. The mode of knowledge through which we know that we are conscious. That's very important. Because that's the mode of knowledge through which we know what we truly are. You see? And since this field is open to experimentation, right? Because we know that we are conscious through direct experience. So we have there a field to explore, although it's different, it's non-phenomenal, but from which we can, through which we can liberate ourselves from all kinds of belief systems that we had inherited from the culture and which were not appropriate. Because when we go to that place, through which we know we are conscious, and if we ask the question, is this consciousness limited in time, for instance? Was it born? What what do we get from that place? From that direct experience of consciousness? If we ask the question, was it born? The answer we get is, there is no such an event, there is no such a thing. So, should we make the conclusion that it wasn't born? Not necessarily that it had no beginning. Not necessarily. That would be a little too premature. But at least the conclusion we can make is that there is no evidence, no experiential evidence that it had a beginning. So that will remove a belief system we had according to which consciousness had a beginning. And that this belief system was validated experientially. You see? We had this belief. It is prevalent in our universities. But there is no evidence. No supporting evidence whatsoever. So we are free from it. That's already very important. So, similarly, we can use the same method, which is really inspired by the scientific method, to reduce everything we believe about consciousness by using this experiential path. And you'll see that all the corpus of belief systems of about consciousness is going to shrink and to melt away and leave us in a situation of complete openness in which we are free from all these belief systems and in which consciousness can be whatever it is, freely, without us superimposing our own take about it, you know. And then it can shine in its own glory, and it will manifest beautifully in our lives, you see. And it will be an extraordinary revelation. That's a promise. But in order to get it, you need to do the job, which is the investigation.
Thank you.